The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right.
Thank you so much. We'll be having time for everyone to chat again once we're all finished, but I'll take this moment to introduce myself. My name is Raven Bradburn. I'm Manager of Corporate and Foundation Relations here at African Wildlife Foundation, and we thank you all so much for participating today. We have a real special treat. We have Will Powell, Director of our Canines for Conservation program here. He has never been in our DC office. This is really exciting, not only for you guys, but for us as staff in DC. So thank you so much for participating. I'm going to hand this over to Jamil to do introductions with ABCG.
Thank you, Raven. My name is Jamil Mandima. I'm the Director for Program Design and Partner Relations. And what I tend to do for African Wildlife Foundation in Washington, DC is to be the face of the African voice among all our partners. So thank you for coming. The Africa Biodiversity Collaborative Group is a platform that brings together a few organizations that have got programs in Africa. And to give us a quick synopsis of who those are, what the mission is James Hutchins, who is the acting coordinator for ABCG. So James.
My name is James Hutchins. I'm the temporary...
Louder, dear.
Apologies. My name is James Hutchins. I'm the temporary program coordinator for ABCG. Rebecca Goodman is out on maternity leave. She had her child, I think, about a week and a half ago, and she'll be back in mid-September. The Africa Biodiversity Collaborative Group, or ABCG, is a voluntary coalition of 7 US-based international conservation NGOs with extensive field programs in Africa. They include the Africa Wildlife Foundation, Conservation International, the Jane Goodall Institute, the Nature Conservancy, Wildlife Conservation Society, World Resources Institute, and World Wildlife Fund. ABCG's core members share their experiences and work together to translate their knowledge into practical tools and guides to address conservation challenges, inform policy, and integrate biodiversity conservation into international development agendas. ABCG is made possible by a grant from the USAID Africa Bureau.
Thank you, James. I kind of put him on the spot, but the whole idea is to really be very clear that ABCG is where African Wildlife Foundation participates with other implementing partners to push the agenda that you all support. So thank you for coming. What we're going to do now is really to transition into our celebrity, Will Powell. And just for logistics, if anybody needs a clarifying question, you can raise your hand. I think you will respond quickly. But it might be best for us to all at the end of the presentation to have a Q&A, because some of the issues may be covered in these subsequent presentations. For the folks online, please remember to type in your questions on the application. We'll take note of them and then ask the same. If you're not hearing what Will is saying, please do put a statement, and then our IT guys will take care of that. Otherwise, Will, over to you. You were introduced already, so.
Thank you, Drew. Good afternoon. So my name is Will Powell. I am the Director of Canine's Conservation Program for AWF. I live in Arusha in northern Tanzania. That's my home. And I arrived on Sunday, so I'm not sure what time of the day it is, but I'm happy to be here today. There is still a major crisis, a poaching crisis in Africa. These are some of the numbers. Black rhinos are down to probably less than 5,000 at the moment. The most recent numbers we can get are accurate numbers from 2016. We sort of maintain we try and sort of watch the populations as much as we can, but these are the latest we have. Elephants are down to 415,000. Lions down to probably about 30,000, and giraffe as low as just under 100,000. It's still a major problem. The illegal wildlife trade in the world is worth about $19 billion. And still we're losing on average, 3 rhino a day, which is horrific. There's 20 to 30,000 elephants are still being killed every year. And we have to do something about it. So we are trying a few things. So African Wildlife Foundation, we have looked at the problem of trafficking, and we've come up with a 3-tier approach, which is stop the killing, which is supporting traditional anti-poaching operations on the ground. So that's sort of helping rangers, and from a dog perspective, that's where our sort of tracking dogs that will track poachers in the field, comes into that side. And then we have the stop the trafficking, which is our canine detection units, which are dog units trained to detect illegal wildlife products at airports and ports, is the mainstay of that. And then as a result of, in fact, the first day that we started working in Mombasa, the first dog that went to work for the project in 2015 was a dog called Beaver. And she was searching luggage at the airport in Mombasa in Kenya. And within an hour of her starting to work, she responded on a bag, and we opened it up, and there was a tusk in the bag. So I thought, this is going to be easy. We're going to take lots of arrests. This is how it is. We brought in, or the Kenya Wildlife Service brought in the police and handed the case over to the police. We then realized that corruption is everywhere. The Malaysian guy who was arrested handed over some money, obviously, to the police. He was allowed to go. The tusk ended up going to the university, into the museum lab in Nairobi for testing to prove that it was, whether it was ivory or not. And they came back with a report saying it was hard plastic and it was not ivory. So somebody paid somebody off there. And so we very quickly realized that, unless we took the next step and we sort of created an ecosystem, a legal ecosystem around the places that we work, to make sure that our cases go to court and are dealt with to the end, to the end of the law, it wasn't going to work. So we developed, AWF developed so we have a sort of prosecutional training, a whole team. I have a colleague called Didi, who's based in Nairobi, who's the former head of prosecution for Kenya Wildlife Service, who now works for us. And what we do is we train everybody from the clerk of court to the lawyers, to the prosecutors, to the magistrates, to the judges, and to make them aware of how wildlife law can be used properly and how it works. So when we make an arrest, when we make a find with our dogs, we can then feed it into this friendly system of people, good people who are not corrupt, who've been trained well, and make the whole thing effective. The third tier, the third pillar that AWF focuses on is stop the demand. And as a dog guy, I should be saying the dogs are the most important thing, but in reality, probably stop the demand is the most important work that we do. In a nutshell, so we train dogs to detect certain illegal wildlife products. The main 3 things that we're looking for at the moment are ivory, pangolin scale, which is the most trafficked wildlife species on the planet at the moment. There's 8 different species, 4 in Africa, and they're being wiped out. I mean, they're being hammered really hard. We find a lot. We found 500 kilos at a time. And I mean, a giant pangolin has probably got 4 or 5 kilos of scale on it. And so it's a lot of individuals. And then rhinos. So those are the 3 main things that our dogs are trained on. Why would we use dogs? People often ask us. So first of all, they've got amazing noses, and I'll go into some details on the next slide. Second of all, they're incorruptible. What I mean is, if I'm a security guy at an airport, and I've been paid $500 in my pocket to turn the other way. If I'm watching the screen of the X-ray and I see a suitcase going past with a tusk in it, I'm not going to blink. I'm not going to react. It's just going to go past, and I'm just going to be thinking about the money in my pocket, and that's going to be that. If you're a dog handler and you have a dog and you're working in an area, the types of areas we work, where there's normally 3 or 4 different agencies around, there's CCTV coverage. Now, if you're with your dog and the dog has a change of behavior, they have an interest in a bag or somebody's luggage, they pull towards, there's no question. It's not like, you can't hide it. Even if you're a good dog handler and you're trying to stop your dog responding, they're like, Dad, Dad, it's here. So they don't, they're incorruptible and they don't lie. If it's there or it's not there. They're also accurate and efficient. People often ask, and sort of when we start working in airports and ports, people say, oh, we're going to slow down the through flow of vehicles and luggage and cargo and slow down business, basically. We search a car in probably 12 seconds. You can search a vehicle properly in about 12 seconds. We don't slow down anything. We're in and out. Luggage is just like, if the smell is there, it's there. We don't have to try hard. Their noses are amazing. And then the final point is the deterrent factor. And I would say the most important thing of the work we do is the deterrent piece. Once people know that there are dogs working effectively at an airport or a port, the patterns change. We don't necessarily stop trafficking completely, but we stop stuff going through the places where we are. A few months ago, we made an arrest in Entebbe in Uganda of 23.5 kilos of rhino horn. It was a Vietnamese guy that had it in his luggage. And when he was questioned, he said he'd bought the horn in Nairobi, and he was asked, why didn't you fly out of Nairobi, JKA? And he said he'd heard that Kenya Wildlife Service had dogs at the airport. He didn't, and because of that, he said he got on the bus and he came to Kampala, and then he was flying out of Entebbe, and he didn't know that we had dogs there as well. And that's where he was arrested. So they're a deterrent. Dogs' noses are amazing. I can talk a lot about dogs' noses, but in a nutshell, in a human, we have an olfactory surface, which is sort of the net that catches odor. Is about the size of a postage stamp, and it's a moist surface in the back of our nose. And then, so air carries odor. We smell coffee or whatever you're smelling, and the particles of odor will land on the olfactory surface, and then send a message to the olfactory part of the brain, which is up here above your forehead, to say that is the smell of coffee or roses or freshly baked bread or whatever it is. Now, in a human, our noses are not bad, but in a dog, instead of having this small net, in the back of their nose here, there is their olfactory surface. If you folded it out, it's almost the equivalent to the surface area of the skin of the dog. It's a huge net. So, and it's honeycombed. It's all folded up, so it fits in the back of their nose. So when they sniff, there's this huge, the net is huge, so they're much more efficient at catching odor to begin with. And on that surface, there are 300 million olfactory receptors. Humans only have 6 million. So, and then once they smell it, once it's caught on the net, as it were, the part of their brain that processes odor is 40 times bigger than ours. So they think and smell. You think a dog will remember you because they see you or hear your voice or whatever. It's about your smell. And they also have this amazing ability to refresh their nose, and it doesn't get clogged up. If you go into a place where there's a very strong smell and it can sort of hang in the back of your nose, a dog doesn't do that. They're able to pick out very small smells from the bigger picture, the bigger odor picture. So they have amazing noses, basically. Back to our work. So we concentrate searching at the moment. We're working at airports and ports, and then at roadblocks and at borders. And so we search vehicles, and we search shipping containers where we can. And then a lot of the work we're doing at the moment is at airports, and that's air cargo, check-in luggage, and hand luggage. Sometimes we have issues having access to getting very close to passengers. In Dar es Salaam, the authorities say that sort of cultural issues are a problem, and we're going to upset certain parts of the community by having dogs too close to them. So there's always challenges, but we search where we can. This is just a slide showing the connectivity. These are some flights. This is not all the flights, but just some flights. The main hubs, sort of Addis Ababa, Nairobi, Dar, Joburg. These places, within hours, you're on a flight and you're heading east to the main market, which is still the Far East. And so we're trying to just get in the way and make it more difficult for the traffickers to get there. There's a quick film of Tasha and Erica in Nairobi. She's an English Springer Spaniel, and she's just searching luggage on a conveyor belt. Happy dog, Waggy Tail. Happy days. I watch that all day. She's just like, she's happy. If the dog is not happy, they're not working. So we have to keep them happy. In simple terms, these are a few of the elements that goes into our program. So apparently, the program director used to have my name under there, but I took it off. Apparently, that's important. And then we need to have decent kennels. So we're working with government authorities. We're not doing this ourselves. We have agreements with African government wildlife authorities to help them develop their own capability and having dog units. So we will design and build them kennels to our specifications. We supply them with appropriate safe transport to make sure that the dogs can be moved. Normally in our projects we don't start with that many dogs. So we need to be able to be flexible and move them around. So vehicles are very important. The most important part of this whole program, I would say, is the technical advisors. I have the privilege to have worked for many years with lots of dog handlers from different African countries that I've trained and have gone to work in countries all over the world. And what we've done for this program is I've basically brought back the best from each of the countries that we've worked in. So in each country that we work, we have a local national who is one of our guys, one of my, it's like my old friends or family, who is experienced handlers, they're trainers, they have years of experience working these dogs in hostile and difficult conditions. And now they've come back as we embed them as a technical advisor with each team. So we make sure that things carry on every day that these dogs work. There is one of my guys is there to make sure that at least we get off to a good start. Simple things like dog food, which we take for granted that we can buy in a supermarket here. In Africa, sometimes it's hard to get hold of decent dog food. So we have to make sure that our supply chains and logistics are good. Storage is always a problem. You can sometimes get imported dog food, decent dog food, but it may be moldy, and then you have issues with aflatoxin and other issues. Dog equipment, simple dog equipment, again, you can't find in lots of parts of Africa. Training aids, very important. So all of our teams, all of our detection dog teams have to, on a regular basis, find stuff, find what they're looking for. When we start in countries, normally we find genuine lots of stuff when we start working. But after a while, when we become effective, people are deterred and we don't find so much ivory and rhino 1, etc. So we need to have access to training aids to make sure that we refresh those dogs, and we put our own stuff out there in bags and make sure that the dogs are kept sharp. Veterinary services are key. Some places we have the privilege of having decent vets, some places we don't. But we've developed our own system. Each team goes out with an extensive vet kit, and all the medications are numbered, and all the handlers are trained to give injections, and at least one from every team is trained to give IVs and drips. And I can diagnose on the phone and then prescribe, tell them what medications to give. And to date, touch wood, We have not lost any dog from any disease and any condition, including snakebite, that sadly other organizations that are doing dogs in conservation have lost numerous dogs. But because of our system and our experience, we're keeping our dogs happy and healthy. So, what we do, we arrest, we deter, and we educate. Arrest is that when we start off in a new place, we make normally lots of arrests, and then we become known, and then we begin to deter, and then as we're working, we're educating. I mean, we're working with small teams of people at these airports, so we can't be everywhere. It's not like Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. There's 420 dogs working there every day. There's a kennel of 420 dogs. And they only search 80% of the luggage at that airport. We are talking about anything from 4 to 10 dogs at an airport. Okay, there's less traffic, there's less flights, but we have to be clever about where we work. We have to choose the flights that we search. So we're very much targeting flights that are heading to key locations, from Hanoi, Hong Kong, Guangzhou, Bangkok. Those are the main sort of destinations that we're looking at, and that's really important. But at these airports, there's lots of other security people working at airports in Africa. So if we make friends with these guys and we encourage them to do their job better and to understand what ivory looks like on an X-ray, then we are sort of increasing our efforts. So it's not just the wildlife authority guys themselves, it's everybody at the airport becomes involved in what we're doing. So these are just some of the, it's rather sad, but there's some of the stuff that we've been finding. From lots of worked ivory, some larger pieces of unworked ivory, pangolin scale. We've even found live tortoises, which our dogs are not trained to find, but our handlers are so sort of in touch with their dogs that basically if a dog smells a bag and there's something, it's like, yeah, there's somebody in there. The handlers will pull the bag, put it through the X-ray again, and then they found a number of live tortoises. Lion's teeth. We've now trained our dogs in most of our places, most of the sites we're working to find lion teeth and lion bone. It's hidden inside, these are ivory beads hidden inside condoms, so sort of all sorts of ways they're trying to hide it. Going back to our relationships with governments, this is where AWF works very, very well. I have been involved in AWF since sort of the end of 2014, and I have been very impressed in the way that we have even been able to establish these dog units within government authorities. And it's key, these relationships and this trust that AWF have with these governments is key to our success. In Tanzania, the wildlife authority is TAWA, Mozambique, ANAC, Ugandan Wildlife Authority, KWS. In Botswana, Department of Wildlife and National Parks, and then in Cameroon, we're working with the ministry. But all of these wildlife authorities, the amount of trust and access that they give us is really, really surprising and really, really encouraging. And they want to there's enough good people in these organizations that want to make a difference that gives you hope and keeps you working. So, at where we are at the moment and where we're heading. So at the moment we are in Nairobi, Mombasa, Dar es Salaam and Arusha, and Entebbe. We're very soon in the next not 2 weeks because I'm still here, but like within 3 weeks we're going to be in Maputo. The kennels are just being finished. Gaborone, in September the kennels will be built and finished in Gaborone. The dogs and handlers for Mozambique and Botswana are already trained and are waiting at the dog school in Arusha. So as soon as the kennels are finished, we're going to be in there and start to operate. We are heading to Cameroon. Cameroon is a special place which is very, very challenging. There's more corruption and more chaos there than any other place that we're going to work. A few months ago, I flew there to do an assessment to decide whether we were going to work there at all. And on the way there on the plane, I wrote my report with all the reasons why we should never work in Cameroon. Before I got there. Anyway, I arrived the first day and I basically like, yep, that was right. So like, then the second day, I realized that it's so bad and it is such a disaster that we must do something. So we have figured out a way, and we're going to, that's the 6th country we're going to move into before the end of this year. We're going to be, in fact, in the next 3 weeks, we're going to start building kennels, and we are going to take the leap and start operating in Cameroon. We already have other programs working with the ministry in a number of national parks in Cameroon, and they have been very successful, and our relations with government are such that we are now confident enough to start there as well. Other places, Botswana, we're moving to the north, to Kasane, and then in Entebbe we're going to move up to Pakwach to cover some of the stuff from the Congolese side and more of the border crossings. The success of our program is because we look at it from the perspective that it's more than just about the dogs. Dogs are relatively easy from my perspective. But the way we train the people that we work with and the way we work with the authorities is the trick to this. So we teach this culture of care, and we introduce this ethos of doing it the right way. Our training course for a handler is sort of 12 weeks. The first 2 or 3 weeks is basically brainwashing everybody into loving dogs. So sitting under trees, hugging puppies and hugging dogs and teaching this culture of care. And once you have that, everything else is easy. Because once they care about their dog, once you show these guys who don't, they don't see as much information as we do. They don't know the issues of poaching to the extent that we understand it. And once you open their eyes and show that, how many elephants are being killed, and we have horrific footage of rhino with their horns cut off, still alive, and I mean, it's just, these guys, we get in their heads, basically, and they become part of the family, and then we can begin to work properly. Success breeds success. The more successful they are, the more successful the project is, and they love it, and some of them they are amazing. A lot of them are at risk to their own personal safety. They are threatened. They are offered bribes. They are on the front line, and they do an amazing job. So that's a few of them. Our success is based on people. It's about, we're really lucky that we have been able to select handlers from the wildlife authorities. I'm the first person to be on the panel of Kenya Wildlife Service officers, and I'm not a Kenya Wildlife Service officer, making a selection of dog handlers. They brought me in as an observer, and within 10 minutes they handed over the whole proceedings to me, and I was able to choose the people that I wanted, not the people that they wanted. And that really makes a difference. Our approach is also not a short-term approach. We're not here we're not going to arrive and drop off some dogs and say, here, we gave Kenya some dogs and we're going to leave. We're there for the long term. This long-term mentoring, sustainability, we're planning our first Train the Trainers course. So the first countries that we've been working in, we're going to select the best handlers from those countries and bring them back to Arusha to do a trainers course. And there's some amazing handlers. There's in fact, one of them there. This lady who, she hasn't even started working, but she's a natural dog person. She's called Mangombe. She's an amazing dog handler. And Erica, the lady you saw in the film in Nairobi. And then there's another Kenyan guy who you'll see shortly with his Malinois called Mariga. They're just brilliant guys. These are some pictures of the technical advisors. These are the guys I was telling you about that I had trained, up to 10. In fact, Zhao, I trained in 2000, so 18 years ago I trained him to be a mine dog handler in Mozambique. And he's now, the whole circle has come back, and he's going to be he is our technical advisor. He's been building kennels.
Did you say a mine dog?
Yeah, so I used to train dogs to find landmines for humanitarian demining organizations. So we're quite good at finding stuff. And if we miss Ivory, it's sad, but it's not critical. But it's like if we missed a mine, it would be a really bad day. So we're pretty good at finding stuff that smells. So we got Happy. He's called Happy Richard Otti. On the left, he's a Ugandan who's going to be working in Botswana. Then we have, he's a bit older than this now. He looks about 12 in that picture. But that is Don, who is our guy in Tanzania. He works with Tanzania Wildlife Authority. Then we have Zhao in the middle. Leonard, so Zhao is in Mozambique. Leonard is in Entebbe in Uganda. He's brilliant. And then Mike is in Kenya. They all have, each wildlife authority has its own culture and its own issues, and these guys, not only are they brilliant dog people, but they're brilliant people. They're very humble, they get on with people, they find a way, they make a plan, and they enable us to do the work that we carry on doing. There's some happy pictures of dogs. So Mariga, the guy I was talking about earlier, is the one on the left. So Mariga and Diva, there's a complete love affair these guys have. On his day off, he comes in to the kennels and he sits and he hangs out with his dog most of the day. He doesn't have a day off. There's more on the left. There's Mariga with Diva. Very sweet. And then this is David Marwa. David is, Mariga is Kenyan, David is Tanzanian. David is from a tribe called the Kuria. And they come from a part of the Serengeti where they're renowned warriors. You do not mess with a courier. If you want somebody in your corner, that's the fella. So, and his dog Pecco is a bit grumpy. He has a side to him. So these are the two guys that if there's an operation like down some dark alley in Dar es Salaam, those are the guys that will go and take care of business. So they're very, very cool. These are two ladies from Uganda, so Elsa, who in fact, yesterday she had an ear operation because she had a hematoma in her ear, but she's fine, but her ears are not going to be as beautiful as they are in this picture. So the breeds we use, I've been talking a lot about detection work, so finding stuff in suitcases and bags and all that sort of stuff. We also are starting to get more into tracking dogs to track poachers in the field. And so we use different breeds for different jobs. For detection, we use a lot of Malinois, because I'm a Malinois fan, and we use some German Shepherds. We use some smaller, wolfy-looking German Shepherds. All our dogs are from working lines. They're not from show lines. They're not necessarily, they are pretty, but they're not here because they're pretty. They're here because they're clever. This is the DSD is a Dutch Shepherd dog, which is similar to the Malinois. The Malinois is one of the 4 types of Belgian Shepherd. So the Shepherds, and then the Springer Spaniels, that's Sam who's going to Mozambique. Those are the main sort of detection dog piece. The Spaniels, we're using them more and more. In airports where there's lots of people around, people are less scared of dogs with their ears down. Dogs with ears up look more aggressive, and apparently are more aggressive, but they're not necessarily. So we use, those are the detection side. Now for tracking, we use some German Shepherds. In fact, the best, probably in my humble opinion, the best tracking dog in Africa is a dog called Jerry, who works in the Serengeti with the Honey Guide Foundation, which we're supporting them and give them dogs. And then German Shorthair Pointers, who are amazing. They're doing really, really well with the heat. Heat is our biggest challenge. Tsetse fly and the heat are the 2 problems for tracking dogs. And they can handle the heat much better than the other dogs we've been using. And then we have 2 newer breeds, which we're really excited about. One is the top right, is a Hanoverian hound. So it's like a mini hound. It's like a bloodhound with a brain. Bloodhounds are not clever. They kind of, once they're on the scent, they follow, but they're not. They don't think about it too much. But these guys they're really cool. It's my new favorite breed. In fact, I'm hoping one. We have two at the moment, and I'm hoping one will fail because I'll be able to take it home with me. And then at the bottom we have another relatively new breed. It's a Gronsky Polski, which is a Polish hound. And again, it's a sort of smaller size hound. The problem with bloodhounds traditionally is they're very heavy and very big, and they can't handle it. When it's really, really hot, they're not that great. But these smaller hounds, even if it doesn't matter that they're black, the Gronsky Polskis, again, we have one at the moment called Thor, who's a brilliant, brilliant tracking dog. So that's some of the breeds. More Malinois, pretty pictures. And this, you can see the connection with this handler. He didn't know the picture was being taken. And when these guys started training, you should have seen the sort of armed distance. They weren't, they were not too keen to be too close to their dogs. And by the end of it, they're completely in love. And this carries on. And, there are other working dogs in Africa with police and with the army and with other organizations. But nobody, that connection that we instill, and we teach as the fundamental sort of foundation to all we do, that care and that culture of care. You don't see that often in other agencies and other working dog organizations. So this is a quick, pretty picture of our kennels. That's not a bad view. There's some of the kennels at our place. We have to change the signage, apparently. We've got to keep up with that. Some training going on, lots of shepherds. The vehicles that we've give to the wildlife authorities. Traditionally, Kenya Wildlife Service has had a dog unit for some time, and they use a sort of pickup truck with these sort of fiberglass boxes on the back of a truck. And in the heat, these poor dogs, they get to work and they're cooked already. I mean, they can't work. So we have these vans which have the best air conditioning of any vehicle that I've seen in Africa. It's like a cold room in there. And we have these 4 boxes, so they've got sort of rubber floors. And the handlers can access, there's a door on the front end as well, so the handlers can access the dogs on the road, so they can say hi and make sure they have water, and if it's a long journey. And they're working really well, so a bit of innovation. These are kennels which we, together with WCS, paid for and built in Entebbe. So there's 12 kennels and accommodation for handlers and officers and etc. These are our kennel, or the Kenya Wildlife Service kennels in Nairobi. The part of Nairobi National Park is pretty close to the airport, and it's more secure than any other part of town. And the only issue we had was we built a run at the back because before when we would clean a kennel, we'd let the dog out on his own and he would wander around and have a pee in the bush. And then we had one of their dogs, one of the old KWS dogs, came back with a hole in his nose basically, but it was a hyena had got hold of his face and bitten him through the snout, poor fella. He was fine eventually, but we then decided we'd build a run, so when they were having their kennel clean, they could run around freely, unless they were on a lead with a handler. These are mobile kennels which we use in places where nothing is built permanently, or we can't move them daily, but they work really well. And in fact, TANAPA in the Serengeti, they want to copy these and build them a lot of the ranger posts, so that they have ability to. They're not going to base dogs there all the time, but if they go on an operation, they'll have a safe place for a dog to spend the evening. These are some of the pictures of, this is the Tanzanian team. A lot of the work the Tanzanian team does is following up on intelligence-led operations. So we keep their identities sort of undercover. So we pixelate all their faces. Any handlers you see you see their faces fully are not people involved in intelligence operations. This, in fact, they heard, this is in Morogoro, they heard that there was an area of the city where there was some pangolin scales were left. And they searched on the outside of all these buildings, and the dog detected or responded to this one building. There were 67 sacks of pangolin scale, and which had originated in Uganda. But it was really cool because it wasn't full, but the connections, our relationship with Ugandan Wildlife Authority and Tanzanian Wildlife Authority enabled us to identify the good guys in both camps, and we connected them. And because of that, the case went all the way through, and people were convicted, and Ugandans were brought to Tanzania and locked up. So it's more than just the dogs, it's the relationships and connecting the good guys in the different countries. And we work quite closely together. Again, this is just a few of the stuff we found. This was December last year, 1 month. There were like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different busts. It's very depressing. So to put it in perspective, in Tanzania, Tanzania is split into different zones, and there's what they call the coastal zone, which runs the whole of the coast of Tanzania, and then quite a lot of the southern part of Tanzania. It's the largest zone. They had, in the last year, they had 27 busts or arrests of substantial amounts of ivory. That is including Tanzania Wildlife Authority, Wildlife Division, and TANAPA, all the wildlife agencies together, 27 busts. Out of those, and numerous people, there's hundreds and hundreds of rangers and people all over the country. Out of those 27 busts, our 6-man team with 4 dogs did 22 out of the 27. So they're good guys. This is in cargo in Dar es Salaam. This is the port in Dar es Salaam. We figured out that if there's over a certain amount of ivory in a box, in a container, we don't even have to open the container if we get up to the seam. So there's, again, the whole process of opening a container at a port is a major bureaucratic problem. But if we get close enough, we can tell you what's in it.
And then what happens?
So if the dog responds to basically the bottom of the door of the container, we bring them up to the seal, and the dog will search the seal. And then if the dog responds and says, "Hey, Dad, there's something there," then we can open it up, and we can have access to open it. But the problem is, if you have, going through the port of Mombasa, there's probably 800 containers being processed every day, and it's a kind of, the whole process is quite expensive. This is again in Tanzania. This was a pretty cool story that it was a Friday night. We made a bust at a house, and all this ivory was buried in the floor of this house, and our dogs found it under the floor. And then the president heard about it, and he came to the ministry the following morning. It was his birthday, and he still came. And in fact, the permanent secretary he'd been away, and he was on the wrong side of town when he heard that at short notice the president was coming, and he ended up getting on a motorbike, to come across town as quickly as he could. So the permanent secretary on the back of a motorbike coming across town to be there when the president came. So and again through AWF's long-term relationships with government, we have access to the highest levels. I mean, our president spends a lot of time, AWF's president spends a lot of time working on the relationships at the highest levels, and it really makes a difference and gives us the ability to do our job, because we have that top cover. That kind of, when he says we're allowed to do it, it happens. And in Uganda, I have the coolest letter ever, which was from Museveni, from the president, basically saying, because when we started in Uganda, we had some hiccups. We weren't allowed to search all the areas of the airport. So by a number of connections, we got to Museveni himself, and he wrote this letter basically saying, these people must be allowed to do whatever they want and go anywhere. And if you get in their way, you will be fired forthwith. That's what it says in there. So every one of the handlers has a soft copy and a hard copy. Read that. So that really does make a difference. That's Nora, a Dutch Shepherd on the left. This is Enrico, both Ugandan dogs on the right. This is these are all in Uganda. I was talking earlier about the rhino horn that had come from Nairobi and ended up in Entebbe. That's the stuff on the left, right there. And Bobo, another Malinois, found that. These two pictures are Enrico. Enrico's not the only dog that works there, but this is just to show the kind of stuff we can find. There was a bangle and some beads wrapped up in cling film, saran wrap, I think you call it, and then tin foil, and then electrical tape, and in a suitcase, and he found it as if it was sitting on the surface. Doesn't matter how well you conceal it. If the smell is there, we will find it. This was a whole lot of ivory beads in a carving, in plastic bags. It was like built inside the carving. And the dog responded on this wooden carving, and only when they put it through the x-ray they could see there was something inside, so they split it open and Enrico had done his job. So this is just more, in fact this was 1,000 tortoises from Ghana that ended up in the airport in Nairobi. This is in a dark alley in Dar es Salaam. This is David and Pecco arresting, I bet this ivory came from that bust. Bushmeat that we came across on the way and arrested people. This is hedgehog skins. There's a lot of changing demand, all going to the Far East. What else we have here? This is hidden inside coffee. There were 4 suitcases full of these blanks, these sort of squares, pieces of ivory from Zimbabwe, pangolin scales at the bottom. All these trophies were in a house in Nairobi, where the dogs, they had some information that there was something in this house. Dogs searched the exterior of the building and showed a change of behavior. That gave them probable cause to go in and make the find and make the arrest. So they're being used more and more. The blue parcels in the middle there, that is all pangolin scale. That was the 500 kilos of pangolin scale. And that was, in fact, Erica and Asha, the ones in the film, and they came into this, there's a huge cargo warehouse at the airport in Nairobi. And she came in the door and it was like, run right across. She was dragged across the building because, that's a lot of smell. And made the arrest there. These are the Botswanan team in training. And here we are. So this is the next steps. So Cameroon, as I said earlier, however challenging it's likely to be, as I say, I think we can make it work, so we're going to take the leap. Mozambique is, because we're looking principally for rhino horn, the stakes are really, really high. It's so expensive, and so many people are involved that we have to be really careful about our security. The kennels are built inside the airport itself. They're under the control tower, which helps from a security perspective. But we have to be really clever and be careful about how we start working. Because if we arrive on day 1 and clean up, we will be taken out. So we have to be careful. But we have a plan. There's always a plan. We're expanding operations in Uganda and Tanzania and Kenya. Basically, we started off with a small program, and if it works, we add to it. And if we see the potential for growth and for further successes, then we're going to add to it. Again, planning an operational base in Kasane in northern Botswana. We always have operational costs, especially as sort of intelligence-run operations. We're paying not a huge amount of money, but money for informants, for the guys to go on the road. Sometimes they're driving for 10, 12 days in a row. We have in Tanzania, we have a dog bus. It's like a 26-seater bus with half of the seats taken out. And there's 4 crates in the bus, and again, amazing air conditioning. And the guys and the dogs all sleep in the bus. It's all kind of like, and off they go, and on a road trip. And off they go. The other thing we're beginning to develop is a self-sustaining model. So from the dog school in Tanzania, we're going to get back into security dogs. So hopefully begin to try and sort of be self-sustaining to a certain extent. We always need some help, but if we can finance ourselves, it will help. And then I'm also very keen on opening or starting a fund to assist handlers and their families in case of emergency. Because again, Erica, the lady in the film, she's a single mother with a daughter that has MS, and she struggles with, going to hospital and backwards and forwards, and we help as much as we can, but life is hard. So it would be nice to have a fund to help these great men and women who do such an amazing job. This is some of the tracking dogs. The two on the left that's in the Serengeti, and this is in Manyara Ranch. And the impact, I mean, if you have a really effective tracking dog, just even one dog in an area, the impact it has on poaching is amazing. Manyara Ranch, I think when the dogs first arrived, which was 6-7 years ago, that year there were 16 elephants killed on the ranch, poached on the ranch. The year the dogs arrived, there was one, and since then, since the dogs have been there, there's been zero. There's been no elephant poached on Manyara Ranch since the dogs being on site. And that is a huge impact. I mean, a word on the street is like, do not go there. Do not mess. In fact, there was a really cool story. The head of anti-poaching for the whole of Tanzania was on a bus going from Arusha to Tarangire for a meeting. And on the way, they passed Manyara Ranch on the way. And he was wearing civilian clothes and with a colleague, so nobody knew who he was. And there's two arbitrary guys on the bus talking. And one, they see some elephant in the distance. And they say, one said, oh, that's cash on the hoof, basically. That's money right there. That's easy money. Another guy on the bus said, no, now they have dogs. They will find you. They will follow you all the way to your house. And so for the head of, and he was a bit of a skeptic, the head of anti-poaching he's been moved sideways since then. But he stood up at a conference and he said, I take my hat off to you. The impact of not only the arrest, but the deterrent. It's a sort of the prophylactic effect of having effective dogs in an area is great. In the Serengeti, we're supporting the Honey Guide Foundation with dogs in the Serengeti. They have the super dog, Jerry on the left. He has tracked a track which was 7 days old. So the carcass was 7 days old and came in and tracked all the way home to the guy's house. And they think it's witchcraft. So they're like, yes, it was me. And really the sort of deterrent effect. But the Serengeti is huge, so he can't cover all of it. So when we started, he was the only dog out there. And so we sent another dog, he's called Chester, and he's not very clever. He's very sweet, but he's not very clever. But he looks pretty similar to Jerry. So he was the dummy dog. So when Jerry would go and work in other parts of the Serengeti on operations, we would make sure that, in fact, we use the not-so-clever handlers as well. So the not-so-clever Tanapa rangers, the not-so-clever dog, would go and they would walk in areas where they would be seen. So near through the villages and on the paths where people are collecting firewood and on the fence lines. And people still thought Jerry the super dog was around. So they sort of held a debate. He was the scarecrow. And so Chester to this day, still has a job. He goes on lots of walks, all dressed up looking like a tracking dog. So. And then Rocky is really good at, we do lineup work. So on a track, we will collect the smell, the odor. If you see a good footprint, we have a sort of very simple kit, which is plastic gloves, sterile gauze, and then a piece of tin foil, and a Ziploc bag. And we lay the gauze on the footprint for a while. And if it's not very hot, we put the tin foil over it to get a bit of heat going. And then we scoop the whole thing out and put it in the Ziploc. And off you go. If you lose the track later, and it happens, you can sort of jump to the next village or to a number of villages where you think the guy might come from. And you get out of the car and you show the dog the smell again, and you say, let's go and have a look for this guy. And you go for a walk. The first village, nothing. Second village, nothing. Third village, boom, on the track again. So he's just driven 15 or 20 Ks home, thinking he's home free, and we'll still find him. And then to do a lineup, we get like 20 people from the village to line up. And these dogs, they're non-aggressive. They are happy, waggy dogs. They don't bite. Will come and they will lie down next to the guy that was at the scene of crime. And in court, it doesn't stand up, but they are terrified. So they're like, yeah, it was me. It was him. It was there, and the gun is there. So, and we play with it. There's a thing called dog goggles, which in fact we used to use in Afghanistan for like sandstorms for the dogs. And so we dress them up. We put on boots, dog boots, and we put on goggles. And if you want to mess with people's heads, these are the strange people with dog. So I have I thought I had a useless degree in anthropology, but I use it playing with people's minds. Another nice one of the two dogs. There's a pointer now based on Manure Ranch, but these guys look after Manure Ranch, and there we go. Thank you very much.
Great. So please go ahead and.
Oh, I was wondering where you got the dogs, or perhaps how you select them to train. Right?
So I've been in the sort of working dog business since a long time, since 1996 I think I started, and I've been training working dogs originally for a company in Texas, and then for looking for landmines and all sorts of things. All the dogs we get are from mainland Europe. We have this connection and a sort of network of people that work with dog clubs and individuals across the whole of Europe. And so if I need dogs, we have guys in Europe who hit the road. They will start driving around Europe, catching up with old friends, seeing who has nice working dogs, which, young dogs that are coming up, they keep an eye on them. These relationships, build. We don't use breeders, because breeders generally you end up with a dog which is sort of puppy farmed and it doesn't have what we need. We want this open, strong, confident dog. So we buy these dogs they come from Holland, from Belgium, from the Czech Republic, from Hungary, from Poland, and then the Springer Spaniels come from the UK, but only from strong working lines. And very few of our dogs have pedigrees. I don't like pedigrees, they're normally not that clever. But we know their mum was a working dog, their dad was a working dog. We know the history, we know the individuals involved. So, and the individuals want to know where their dogs go, and this kind of, it's like a family again. It's a much easier way to deal with things. And people are looking for dogs for us. So, I mean, in fact, we're going to buy a few more dogs quite soon, because I just gave some of the Botswanan dogs to the Kenyans. So I had to replace them. And I've already put out word, and they're already saying there's a guy in Northern Holland who I bought dogs from 6 years ago, and has got a really nice young male. And so it's kind of, that's the connection. It's less sort of business. It's more, I will sit in somebody's, there was a time I saw this guy's dog, and I fell in love with his dog. It was a young dog, and I was determined to buy this dog, and he didn't want to sell his dog. So I sat in his kitchen for 2 days, and he smoked a lot, and I was like drinking a lot of coffee and inhaling his cigarette smoke until I wore him down. And then eventually he sold me the dog. So we get from Europe. People say, why don't you get dogs in Africa? Why don't you, they're hardier and they're used to. The problem is African dogs are all about survival. They're worried about two things. They're worried about somebody doing something bad to them, whether it's an animal or a person. So there's a lot of fear and a lot of distraction. And they're worried about food. They're hungry. Even at like 3 or 4 generations, if you put them in a good environment for 3 or 4 generations, they still have this kind of mad thing about food. So they're distracted. Our guys are completely crazy about, we use a Kong, a rubber toy, which is like we live for. Kong is life. In fact, the most exciting meeting I'm going to have ever in my life is, when is it? Like next week. We're gonna go and meet Kong. We're going to
Mr. Kong.
yeah, we're going to Denver to the Kong people. So for me, it's like meeting like the rock star. So that's why. And then if you have a dog who's driven by a toy, then it's really fun because we manipulate them to do whatever we want, and they get a toy at the end. That's.
How many dogs are in service right now, and how many dogs do you project you're going to need in the next year?
So I think we have 29 in total teams, so man and dog. And then we have sort of extension plans for all of the countries that we're working in at the moment, where we're having success at the moment. We don't want to get too big. It's about, being effective, being clever about the resources. We don't want to leave, eventually the plan is that the wildlife authorities will take over more of the burden of the cost and the responsibility. And we don't want to have a sort of, the problem with Kenya Wildlife Service at the moment is they have, I think, 28 dogs themselves. The only dogs out of those 28 that are working are the 7 dogs that we have given them. The other dogs are just sitting eating dog food. And they eat good dog food, but it's just, they don't do anything.
They're sitting where?
In Kenya.
No, they're just sitting there?
They're sitting, yeah. So there's dogs in the field, there's tracking dogs in like 6 different sites. And they're just management is being really bad, and the system hasn't been working. But in the last week, I've heard that the Deputy Director of Security is being replaced by an old friend of mine, and he's bringing a team which includes an old dog guy who I've known for like 15 years, and there's a plan. We have a plan. So we can turn the whole thing around with advice. Most of this stuff is not hard. It's not complicated. I mean, it's just doing it the right way. So.
What's the market for these pangolin scale? What are they used for?
So, the Chinese use them. They say they're a cure for cancer.
Okay.
But I think so. There's 8 different subspecies. There are the 4 Asian species, and then 4 African species. They traditionally in the Far East they were a delicacy. They were eaten, and I think somebody ended up saying, "Oh, we've eaten the insides, now we're left with all these scales. What are we going to do with them? Find something." So they started selling them as that was the deal with. And then they ran out. I mean, the Asian species were wiped out almost, and then they came to Africa, and that's it's still principally for the cure for cancer.
Yeah.
It's not. It's you eat your fingernails.
Yeah.
2 questions. One, are most of the poachers, traffickers, sort of small-scale independent, or is there like a large, more sophisticated effort that could easily sort of thwart the difference?
There are.
And then,
can I answer that one?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So depends. As I say, we're going to soon to be working in 6 different countries. It depends on the country. A lot of the poaching on the ground, for instance, in Tanzania, is the small scale, the sort of an individual from the village going into the national park. And so there's not necessarily that level of organization, but the guy that he sells to, and then the middleman, there are these sort of whatever you want to call them, these sort of gangs, and those are the people that we're after. So we get a lot of intelligence from once you catch one, and if you get the right intelligence from them, and then you can follow it up and see their phones. We always grab their phones straight away, and you can see who they're talking to, and then you can tie it all together. But I mean, there are some serious gangs in Kenya. Kenya is more sort of efficient, and Mombasa Port is still our biggest challenge because of that. And levels high within government were involved which makes it a bit more tricky. But again, we have a plan.
Well, that's what I was wondering, because it seems like the small scale would be affected by the deterrence, but the sort of organized, more sophisticated gangs, it doesn't feel like the reach is broad enough that they would not
But
be
it
able
does,
to find ways
we
around
upset
it.
them. I mean,
Yeah.
we're beginning to get, I mean, we get more threats, we get, there's stuff that we're doing. In fact, we had in the office in Nairobi a couple of months ago, we had a sort of an anthrax scare. Somebody sent us an envelope of powder, which everybody's really worried about. And I was chuffed because I was like, we're obviously pissing somebody off, and that's what we're supposed to be doing. So, but we do, I mean, I'm very conscious about the security of my technical advisors. Every country we have an exit plan, and they have safe houses, and we have they're all useful lads who know how to look after themselves. And then personally, I mean, my family lives, in East Africa, so we have to be careful what we do in Tanzania. I have two sons who have been at boarding school in Kenya. They're just coming to the end next week. The youngest finishes school there and starts to go to boarding school in England. Once he's out of Kenya, I'm going to ramp it up a bit. So we have to be careful, but there are, there's a plan. There's always a plan.
And then my other question was about, you mentioned the strong relationships with the wildlife authorities, but of course, once you go down the chain in terms of the court system and that's a whole larger web of actors, how successful have we been in terms of getting it through?
Very, I would say. I mean, Dee Dee's program is really cool. I mean, she goes out and we have these sort of workshops, 4 or 5 day workshops, and surprisingly, everybody comes. Like high court judges, everybody comes. And they just, most of the time, they just didn't know how to use the wildlife law and the Wildlife Act effectively. And after she's been there, the prosecutions and the cases that go all the way to the guy being locked up or fined or whatever, our success rate is pretty high. I mean, it's impressive. But you need, one doesn't work without the other. So it's been a really important part of the whole program.
I'm going to take a moment. We do have a few questions online as well. If we can do maybe 2 more questions in here and then get to the few that have been typed in, that'd be awesome. So what's your budget for the year? Like how much for a year?
Don't ask me, I'm the dog guy.
No. So like your program, okay.
The program budget, Where's Philip?
Well, I think on average, per unit is at 750,000
per country.
Per country.
Per
country.
That's a startup cost.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Per
the
country.
actual cost when you add in indirect and staffing and everything else to start up in a country, which is a 3-year budget, is about 1.2 million. But that's to get the vehicles and to get the kennels and staffing and that's startup. And then of course after that, to Will's point, there's ongoing support and investment in those programs, and of course that budget goes down considerably.
So
we can get you a budget if you're interested in.
So starting up is the expensive bit, and then once you're up and running, then it's not too bad.
Early on, you mentioned that patterns are changing because of the work that you're doing. What's the plan to conquer that issue? And education in Asia, is that having any effect at all?
The first
to
question.
Stop the demand.
Yeah, the first question is when we started the first year that we worked in Nairobi at JK, the International Airport in Nairobi, we had 51 arrests in the first year, and I think we had 2 dogs there. 51 busts in the first year. And then it's dropped off, and now we haven't had a single arrest for the last 6 months, I think. 5, 6 months. And so people are just, stuff is not going through there. But they are moving elsewhere. So I have the feeling they've moved closer to my home, which is in Tanzania, through Kilimanjaro International Airport. So we're going to expand the Tanzanian Wildlife Authority teams up, and we're going to start covering there. We're also going to start working at the border. it's a lot of it's sort of intelligence led because we're only small, so you have to kind of follow where the information is. And again, we can't stop it completely. But if you begin to put pressure and begin to sort of change the way people work and make it more expensive and more of a headache and more risky, then people begin to think about doing something else, hopefully. And then the other question was, the other part of the question? So I would say, I would say yes. I would say, in the last probably 3 years, the sort of level of education in China about elephants and rhinos is huge, and it has changed the demand. Also, the fact that China's ban of trade of ivory also helps, and it all works together. And I mean, really, some of the work that that Jamil does and Kadu does and Craig does, and at the high levels of government, makes a huge difference to, and it gives us the ability to do what we do. So.
Good, thank you.
Are you ultimately hopeful or not?
You have to be. I have to be.
Yeah.
I spoke to my boss is a brilliant man called Philip Muruthi. He's a brilliant Kenyan. He's the Vice President of Species Protection, which I fall under. I asked him last week, I said, I want some numbers. I want to see where we are. He told me that in the areas that we as AWF are working, 79% of the areas that we're working, there is a stabilization or an increase in elephant populations, which is pretty damn cool. Considering where we were coming from, numbers are still really bad, but there is some
pockets.
Yeah, there are some pockets and some hope, and you can't just stop. You can't just let it be.
Samburu is a pocket, evidently.
Yeah, in Kenya. There's a lot of. I mean, there's less poaching going on in Kenya than the other. Kenya is a big transit route. Stuff coming from Uganda, from Congo, from Tanzania comes through Kenya. But the other thing was, my brain is going. It was a really important point which I've forgotten. Come back to me. Anyway, sorry, but yes. But I am. You have to be optimistic. Oh, so I was talking to some friends. Back to me. I was talking to some friends who recently been to Dar es Salaam. Some close friends who used to live in Dar es Salaam. And they said, Dar es Salaam, everybody is miserable. The economy is down. Everybody, there's no work, there's unemployment, no investment. Things are terrible. And he said, coming back up to Arusha, where I live, he said it's like another planet. It's like another country. And the reason that there are still things going on in Arusha is because of tourism. And every day the flights are full of tourists coming to see. They don't come to see Maasai or come and see a mountain. They come to see elephants. They come to see wildlife. And so, if the elephants disappear, the impact on so many people across the whole of the northern part of Tanzania, the poverty, the crime, unemployment is huge. So you have to be optimistic. And also, the more tourists we find, the more sort of Land Rovers driving around with tourists, the less poaching there is. Because even the driver guides, who, their income is reliant on finding elephants. So if they see something suspicious, they will report it. Suddenly you have thousands of eyes all over the northern section of Tanzania, all these game drivers keeping their eye out for something suspicious. So poachers generally stay away.
I have a second, more parochial question. What do you do for snake bites in a dog?
So we do something first of all, you have to do immediately. Right. Depending on the species of snake. But what we do is we have two things. One is there's a drug called dexamethasone, which is it's a steroid anti-inflammatory. And if you give a dog an overdose of dexamethasone, it slows down their metabolic rate. It slows all the systems down. So we give them a bucket of this stuff. We like the whole 100 ml bottle, half of it we'll like give them straight away. The second thing we do, which sounds a bit barbaric, but we carry a cattle prodder, electric shock thing. And if we've seen the site of the bite, we pour a sort of bucket of water over them and we fry them, we zap them. And it's horrific. And they wet themselves and they scream and they holler but touch wood, every time we've done it, this is more wooden than that is, every time we've done it, they survive. So in fact, we've had my own 2 spaniels at home, both bitten by a young snake at the same time. And we were away, but my staff know the drill, and they did what they were supposed to do, and both all survived.
Why? Because their body expresses it? Is that what you're
We're not
forcing
even
them
sure.
to do by shocking them?
No, what happens
They
is it
do it
changes
for human beings.
the proteins.
Oh, okay.
The electric current changes the protein in the
Oh,
venom.
wow. So it has to be a really venomous snake to...
Yeah, I mean...
So you're like, it's life or death, and...
Yeah, and we've had we also have some Jersey cows at home. My wife has Jersey cows.
Okay.
And we've had cows that are completely down, lying there, moaning, busy dying. And we pour a bucket of water over them and zap them. And within half an hour, they're up and feeding. So the magic of the electric shock. So we don't go anywhere without.
They do it for people in Virginia.
Do they?
Yes, it's been suggested to me when I've had snake bite.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a couple questions online that we want to make sure we get to. And also there will be a bit of time afterward for everyone to say hello or maybe ask a couple more questions. And I want to make sure we get to people who've been listening in. We have someone who's asking about how you decide when to retire dogs.
So basically, depends on the breed, but most of our dogs, they work until they're sort of 11 or 12 years old, and when they begin to slow down a bit, and we can give them different jobs, sort of less work to begin with, and then when they get time to properly retire, either we have a program of either finding them homes in certain parts of, like in Nairobi, there's a lot of people that will be able to look after the dogs to a standard that we would be happy with, or they come home to me. I mean, it's like, I have already 6 dogs in my house, so I want a few more. So that's the bottom line. But we've had before, when I did mine dogs, we used to retire them, I used to bring them back from Afghanistan to Tanzania, and then we taught them to find scat. In fact, we used them to find predator scat for researchers in the saloon. It was much more fun and easy than finding landmines. So it's kind of, we'll find them a job to do and make sure that they're looked after.
And then another question, how do you select handlers and what qualities do you look for?
So I would say I'm not a bad dog trainer, but I'm better at choosing dogs and choosing handlers. And I have a sort of a 2-day process of handler selection that I go through, asking all sorts of, not just the normal questions about dogs, but I want to know, I like handlers who, I don't like people that are too young. I like people that have kids, especially younger kids, have some responsibility. They also, if they have dogs in their house, I always ask them, what's the name of the dog? Because everybody says, yeah, I have a dog. And you say, what's the name of the dog? And they say, oh, the dog's called Simba. It's like, how did that dog get its name? And then you begin to dig a bit deeper into whether he's telling a lie or whether it's the truth. In Uganda, every dog was called Simba. It seems to be a very popular name in Uganda, but it turns out that it's a genuine. Lots of dogs are called Simba. Anyway, and then I also ask, how did the dog come to the household? And then you begin to hear it. And then, so the first day is interviews, and can normally cut through the BS pretty quickly and say, sort of, you're out, you're in. And it's a feeling. It's kind of like, so people have it or they don't have it. And I'm pretty good at finding out whether they have it. And then the second day is always a dog. A dog will do the other part of the interview. So we always find in a country where we're not there already, we'll find somebody's got a dog at home and make sure they bring in the dog. And literally seeing the guy next to the dog. We had in Mozambique, there were the senior trainers from the police dog school came to apply for jobs. And the first day, like, all the questions were right. It was perfect. And they said all the right things and they knew all the stuff. And then I brought them this dog, this young Rottweiler. In fact, there was somebody from WCS had the dog at home, and so I bring it. These two guys were completely, there was like this, and there was this huge gap between them, and there was no familiarity, and there was nothing. There was no love and no, however perfect they were on paper, no chance. But the handlers turned out to be just really good, nice people that cared about dogs.
We'll take one last question. This is asking, what country or region would you like to set up an operation if you had enough money? So ideally.
I think Addis Ababa, Ethiopia would be the next place where we should be. The Ethiopian Airlines is the biggest airline in Africa and connects with so many countries. And if we can go in there, and it is challenging because even though there's less corruption at the government level, the systems of work in Ethiopia, the bureaucracy grinds you down. To make any decision, you have to have some representative from every single ministry in the country to decide about wildlife. I mean, it's crazy. Everybody has to be there. And then they all have to decide, and it takes time. But if we could, that would be the next place that I would consider going to. And also to boost the capability of the KWS, Kenya Wildlife Service, dog unit, the tracking dog piece, and the whole thing across the board.
Excellent. So I know we ran a little bit late, but I want to thank everyone. Should probably stand up, I'm so short. I thank everyone for participating and applaud Will. Thank you so much for and thanks to ABCG. And I know that some people have kind of blocked off a bit of time with Will, but I want to take about 5-10 minutes for everyone to be able to say hello and introduce themselves. So again, thank you so much. There's still snacks outside and coffee and water. And again, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.